William stood at the hospital entrance, his hands trembling as he gripped the car keys. The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot, but he barely noticed. His mind was racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. Today was the day he had been dreading for months. Kate had been fighting cancer for 2 years now. The treatments, the hope, the setbacks, it had been a roller coaster that neither of them wanted to ride. But through it all, they had faced everything together. Now, the doctors had given them news that changed everything. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh as William entered the familiar corridors of St. Mary's Hospital. The smell of disinfectant and the sound of machines humming filled the air. Nurses moved quietly from room to room, their shoes making soft squeaking sounds on the polished floors. Room 237 had become like a second home to William over the past few months. He had memorized every detail: the pale green walls, the single window that looked out onto the garden, the uncomfortable blue chair where he spent countless hours. But today felt different. There was a heaviness in the air that he couldn't shake. Kate was awake when he entered, her face lighting up despite the pain medication that made her drowsy. Her once thick brown hair had grown back in soft patches after the chemotherapy, giving her an almost childlike appearance. She was sitting up in bed wearing the bright yellow pajamas he had brought her last week. "You're early," she said with a weak smile, her voice barely above a whisper. The effort of speaking seemed to tire her, but her eyes sparkled with the same warmth that had captured his heart 15 years ago, when they first met at college. William pulled the familiar blue chair closer to her bedside. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted, taking her thin hand in his. Her skin felt paper-thin and cold, despite the warm blankets covering her. "I kept thinking about what Dr. Martinez told us yesterday. The conversation with the doctor had been devastating. The cancer had spread faster than anyone expected. The treatments that had given them hope for so long were no longer working. Dr. Martinez had spoken gently about comfort care and making the most of the time they had left." The words had hit William like a physical blow. Kate squeezed his hand with what little strength she had. "I know it's scary," she said. "I'm scared too, but I need you to promise me something." Her voice grew more serious, and William leaned closer to hear her better. "What is it?" he asked, though part of him was afraid of what she might say. "I need you to promise me that you'll be okay, that you'll keep living after I'm gone. Find happiness again. Don't spend the rest of your life grieving for me." Tears began to form in her eyes, but she blinked them back. William felt his throat tighten. The thought of life without Kate seemed impossible. She had been his best friend, his partner, his everything. They had planned to grow old together, to travel the world, to watch their children graduate and get married. All those dreams now seem like they belong to someone else. "I can't imagine life without you," he said honestly. "You're asking me to do something I don't know how to do." Kate shifted in her bed, wincing slightly from the movement. "I'm not asking you to forget me. I'm asking you to remember me by living, by finding joy again, by being the amazing man I fell in love with." She paused, gathering her strength. "Promise me, William, please." The morning wore on as they talked about memories, about the good times they had shared. Kate grew tired more quickly now, but she fought to stay awake as if she knew their time for conversations like this was running out. William told her about the new project at work, about their neighbor's new puppy, about all the normal things that suddenly seemed so precious. Around noon, Kate's sister Sarah arrived with lunch from their favorite restaurant downtown. The three of them had shared many meals together over the years, but today the food sat mostly untouched. Sarah tried to keep the conversation light, sharing gossip from her job and funny stories about her teenage sons. As the afternoon sun streamed through the window, Kate began to drift off to sleep. Her breathing was shallow but steady. William watched the gentle rise and fall of her chest, memorizing every detail of this moment. He knew that days like this were numbered, and he wanted to hold on to every second. The hospital room filled with the quiet sounds of machines monitoring Kate's vital signs. William remained in his chair, holding her hand, afraid that if he let go, she might slip away. The weight of her request pressed on his mind. How could he promise to be happy when his whole world was falling apart? Dr. Martinez stopped by during his evening rounds. He spoke quietly with William in the hallway, explaining what to expect in the coming days and weeks. The conversation was clinical but kind, filled with medical terms that William was still learning to understand. The reality of the situation settled over him like a heavy blanket. When he returned to Kate's room, she was awake again, her eyes searching his face. "What did he say?" she asked, though they both already knew the answer. "A few weeks, maybe less," William said, his voice breaking slightly. "He wants to make sure you're comfortable. They're going to increase your pain medication." Kate nodded slowly. "Then we need to make these weeks count," she said with the determination that surprised him. "I want to see the sunset from the garden tomorrow. I want to hear you play guitar again. I want to tell you all the things I need you to know." As visiting hours came to an end, William prepared to leave for the night. This was always the hardest part, walking away not knowing what he might find when he returned the next day. Kate was drowsy from the pain medication, but she fought to stay awake to say goodbye. "I love you," she whispered as he leaned down to kiss her forehead. "I love you too," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll see you in the morning." As William walked back through the hospital corridors, Kate's request echoed in his mind. The promise she asked for seemed impossible, but he knew it came from a place of love. She wanted him to have a future, even if she wouldn't be part of it. The thought both broke his heart and filled him with a strange sense of purpose he didn't fully understand yet. The next morning brought an unexpected gift. Kate woke up feeling stronger than she had in weeks. The pain medication was working well, and for the first time in days, she managed to eat a full breakfast. The nurses were amazed by her improvement, though everyone understood it might be temporary. "Today feels like a good day," Kate announced when William arrived at his usual early hour. Her color looked better, and there was a spark in her eyes that had been missing recently. "I want to go to the garden like we talked about." William felt a mix of hope and caution. He had learned not to read too much into these good days, but he also knew they were precious. "Are you sure you're strong enough?" he asked, already knowing he would do whatever she wanted. Dr. Martinez approved the trip to the hospital garden with some conditions. Kate would need to use a wheelchair, and they couldn't stay out too long. But the smile that spread across Kate's face when she heard the news made all the precautions worthwhile. The hospital garden was a small oasis tucked between the main building and the parking structure. Most patients and families didn't know it existed, but Kate and William had discovered it during one of her earlier stays. It had become their special place, somewhere they could pretend they were anywhere but a hospital. William pushed Kate's wheelchair along the winding path between the flower beds. The autumn air was crisp and clean, a welcome change from the recycled hospital air they had been breathing. Kate tilted her face up to catch the sunlight, closing her eyes and smiling. "I had forgotten how good fresh air smells," she said, taking deep breaths despite her weakened lungs. "And look at those flowers. They're still blooming even though it's October." The garden was alive with late-season color. Orange marigolds lined the pathways and purple asters swayed gently in the breeze. A small fountain gurgled in the center, surrounded by benches where other visitors sat quietly. William parked Kate's wheelchair near their favorite spot, a bench under an old oak tree. "Remember our first date?" Kate asked suddenly, watching leaves drift down from the branches above them. "You were so nervous you spilled coffee all over your shirt." William laughed, the sound feeling strange after so many days of worry and sadness. "I thought for sure you wouldn't want to see me again. You were so understanding about it, though. You even helped me clean it up." "I knew right then that you were special," Kate said, reaching for his hand. "Most guys would have been embarrassed or tried to play it off. But you just laughed at yourself. I loved that about you." They spent the next hour sharing memories from their 15 years together. Their first apartment with the leaky ceiling and the radiator that clanged all night. The trip to Europe they took for their 5th anniversary, getting lost in Venice and not caring because they were together. The day they bought their house, painting every room themselves and arguing playfully about color choices. "We've had a good life," Kate said quietly, watching a squirrel gather acorns near the fountain. "Better than most people get. I want you to remember that when things get hard." A young couple walked past them, holding hands and laughing about something on the man's phone. They looked to be about the same age Kate and William had been when they met. William watched them with a mixture of nostalgia and sadness, remembering when the future had seemed endless and full of possibilities. "I keep thinking about all the things we won't get to do," William admitted. "The trips we planned growing old together, maybe having grandchildren someday." Kate was quiet for a moment, considering his words. "But think about all the things we did get to do. How many people can say they found their soulmate in college and spent 15 happy years together? How many people get to love someone as much as we love each other? A nurse came to check on them after an hour, reminding them gently that Kate needed to rest. As William pushed her wheelchair back toward the hospital, Kate asked him to stop for a moment. She pulled a small envelope from her pocket, her hands shaking slightly. "I wrote you something," she said, holding out the envelope. "But don't read it now. Save it for when you really need it." William took the envelope, feeling its weight in his hands. His name was written on the front in Kate's familiar handwriting, though the letters were shakier than usual. He slipped it into his jacket pocket next to his heart. Back in her room, Kate was exhausted from the outing, but happy. The color had returned to her cheeks, and she seemed more like herself than she had in weeks. Sarah arrived in the afternoon with more family members, Kate's parents, her brother Mark, and William's sister Jennifer, who had driven down from Portland. The room filled with gentle conversation and quiet laughter. Kate held court from her hospital bed, telling stories and making jokes despite her weakness. It was like a reunion, except everyone was trying not to think about why they were all gathered together. Kate's mother sat beside the bed, holding her daughter's hand and smoothing her hair. They had always been close, and watching them together made William's chest tight with emotion. Kate's father stood by the window, looking out at the garden where they had spent the morning. He was a quiet man who showed his love through actions rather than words. "I want everyone to know how grateful I am," Kate said when there was a lull in the conversation, "for all the love, all the support, all the visits and calls and prayers. I know this is hard for everyone, but you've made it easier for me." Her brother Mark cleared his throat roughly. He was 2 years older than Kate and had always been protective of his little sister. "You don't need to thank us," he said. "You're family. This is what family does." As evening approached, the visitors began to leave one by one. Each goodbye was careful and gentle, filled with unspoken understanding. Kate's parents were the last to go, her mother kissing her forehead and whispering something that made Kate smile. William settled into his chair for what had become their evening routine. Kate was growing tired but fought sleep, wanting to make the most of every moment. They talked about the day, about the warmth of the sun and the beauty of the flowers. "Today was perfect," Kate said as her eyes began to close. "Thank you for taking me outside, for pushing my wheelchair and not complaining when I wanted to stop and smell every flower." "Thank you for having a good day," William replied, "for laughing and telling stories and being yourself. I needed to see you happy." As Kate drifted off to sleep, William remained awake watching her. The envelope in his pocket seemed to burn against his chest, but he resisted the urge to read it. She had said to save it for when he really needed it, and somehow he knew that time hadn't come yet. The night was quiet except for the sounds of the hospital around them. William dozed fitfully in his chair, waking every time Kate stirred or coughed. He had gotten used to these interrupted nights, but tonight felt different. There was a peace in the room that hadn't been there before, as if something had been settled between them. When the first light of dawn began to filter through the windows, William realized that Kate had slept through the night without significant pain. It was a small miracle that he chose to see as a gift, a sign that maybe they would have a few more good days together. The good day in the garden marked the beginning of what William would later remember as their most precious week together. Kate's energy seemed to return in small bursts, allowing for moments of normalcy that felt like unexpected gifts. The doctors explained that this sometimes happened, a rally before the end. But William chose to focus on the present, rather than what it might mean. Kate had made a list during one of her wakeful nights. Written in shaky handwriting on a piece of hospital stationery, it contained simple things she wanted to experience one more time. William found the list on her bedside table when he arrived Thursday morning, and his heart both broke and soared as he read it. Hear William play guitar, watch a sunrise, eat chocolate ice cream, have my hair brushed, listen to our wedding song, hug everyone I love. The items were numbered 1 through 6 with small check marks next to some of them. "You found my list," Kate said, noticing him reading it. She was sitting up in bed, looking more alert than she had in days. "I thought if I wrote down the important things, we could make sure we do them." William folded the paper carefully and put it in his wallet next to a photo of their wedding day. "This is a beautiful list," he said. "When do we start?" That afternoon, William brought his guitar to the hospital. It felt strange carrying the instrument through the sterile corridors. But the nurses smiled when they saw it. Music was healing, they said, and they encouraged families to bring whatever brought comfort. Kate's face lit up when she saw the familiar case. They had met in college at an open mic night where William had been performing. His music had been one of the first things that drew her to him. And over the years, he had written several songs just for her. William tuned the guitar carefully, his fingers remembering the familiar chords even though he hadn't played much during Kate's illness. "What would you like to hear?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Play Kate's song," she said without hesitation. It was the piece he had written for her during their second year of dating, a simple melody with lyrics about finding home in another person's eyes. As William's fingers moved across the strings, the hospital room transformed. The medical equipment faded into the background, and for a few minutes they were just two people in love, sharing music the way they had hundreds of times before. Kate closed her eyes and smiled, humming along to the parts she remembered. Other patients and family members began gathering in the hallway outside their room, drawn by the music. William played several more songs, some of their favorites, some he made up on the spot. When he finished, there was gentle applause from their unexpected audience. "That was perfect," Kate said, reaching for his hand. "I had forgotten how your music makes everything better." The next item on Kate's list proved more challenging. Watching a sunrise required careful timing and permission from the medical staff. But Dr. Martinez understood the importance of these moments and arranged for Kate to be moved to a room facing east for one night. William arrived at the hospital at 5 in the morning, bringing coffee and Kate's favorite blueberry muffins from the bakery downtown. Kate was already awake, propped up in bed and watching the window eagerly. Her breathing was more labored than it had been the day before, but her spirit seemed strong. "I used to watch the sunrise every morning when I was little," Kate said, as they waited for the sky to lighten. "My bedroom faced east, and I would wake up early just to see it. I thought it was magic the way the darkness turned to light. The sky began to change gradually, deep purple giving way to pink and orange. William had seen thousands of sunrises in his life, but watching this one with Kate felt like seeing it for the first time. The colors reflected off her face, making her skin glow despite her illness. "Look at that," Kate whispered as the sun finally appeared above the horizon, a brilliant ball of gold against the painted sky. "It's beautiful. Every single day this happens, and most people miss it because they're sleeping." They watched in comfortable silence until the sun was fully up, and the magic of dawn had given way to ordinary daylight. Kate was tired from the early morning, but she was satisfied. Another item checked off her list. The chocolate ice cream was easier to arrange. Sarah brought it from Kate's favorite shop across town, triple chocolate with chocolate chips, the kind that was so rich most people couldn't finish a small serving. Kate managed only a few spoonfuls, but she savored each one, closing her eyes to concentrate on the taste. "I'm going to miss ice cream," she said with a small laugh. "And pizza. And your grandmother's apple pie. Funny how you think about food when you're dying." Having her hair brushed became a daily ritual. Kate's hair had grown back softer and finer than before, like a baby's hair. William would sit on the edge of her bed and gently run a soft brush through the short strands, being careful not to pull or hurt her sensitive scalp. "My mother used to brush my hair like this when I was sick," Kate said during one of these sessions. "There's something so comforting about it, like being taken care of." William found these moments surprisingly intimate, more so than many of the grand gestures of their relationship. The simple act of caring for her hair became a way of saying all the things that were too big for words. Their wedding song required some creativity. They had danced to At Last by Etta James at their reception 8 years ago, swaying slowly while their friends and family watched with tears in their eyes. The hospital didn't have a sound system, but William's sister Jennifer brought a small speaker that connected to his phone. As the familiar opening notes filled the room, William helped Kate stand beside her bed. She was weak and unsteady but determined to dance. They moved slowly, barely swaying, her head resting against his chest while he supported most of her weight. "At last, my love has come along," Kate sang softly along with Etta James, her voice thin but sweet. "My lonely days are over and life is like a song." William felt tears running down his face, but he didn't try to stop them. This moment was too precious to worry about appearing strong. They danced until the song ended, and then Kate sank back onto the bed, exhausted but happy. "That was better than our wedding dance," she said, breathing heavily, "because now I know how rare love like ours really is." The last item on Kate's list, hugging everyone she loved, was scheduled for the weekend when all the family could gather again. But as the week progressed, it became clear that Kate's energy was fading. The good days were becoming shorter, and the pain was harder to control. Dr. Martinez spoke with them honestly about what to expect. Kate's body was beginning to shut down, and while she wasn't in immediate danger, the end was approaching more quickly than anyone had hoped. They needed to prepare for the possibility that she might not have another good week. That night, as Kate slept fitfully beside him, William pulled out the envelope she had given him in the garden. He held it for a long time without opening it, knowing that once he read her words, everything would change. But finally, as the hospital settled into its quiet nighttime rhythm, he carefully tore open the seal. The letter was 2 pages long, written in Kate's careful handwriting. As William read her words of love, gratitude, and hope for his future, he understood that she had been preparing for this moment far longer than he had realized. Her letter was full of practical advice mixed with emotional truth, a roadmap for learning to live without her. At the bottom of the 2nd page, she had written, "The hug I want to give you is in this letter. Every time you read it, you're getting a hug from me. Use it whenever you need to feel loved." William folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. Outside the window, the city was settling into sleep, but William remained awake, holding Kate's hand and thinking about the list they had almost completed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, they had shared music and sunrises and ice cream and dance. Tonight had been enough. Friday morning arrived with an unexpected crisis. William found Kate struggling to breathe when he arrived at the hospital. The nurses were already there, adjusting her oxygen and checking her vital signs. Her skin had taken on a grayish color that made William's stomach drop. "She had a difficult night," the nurse explained quietly. "The fluid is building up in her lungs faster than we expected. Dr. Martinez wants to talk with you both about adjusting her care plan." Kate was awake but clearly struggling. Each breath seemed to require enormous effort, and she couldn't speak without gasping. William took her hand, feeling how cold her fingers had become overnight. The vibrant woman who had danced to their wedding song just 2 days ago seemed to be slipping away before his eyes. Dr. Martinez arrived within the hour, his expression serious, but kind. He spoke gently about the changes happening in Kate's body and the options available to them. They could try more aggressive treatments to buy time, but they would likely make Kate more uncomfortable. Or they could focus entirely on keeping her pain-free and peaceful. "What do you want to do?" William asked Kate, though speaking clearly required great effort from her. "Peaceful," she managed to whisper. "Want to finish the list." The last item, hugging everyone she loved, suddenly became urgent. William called Sarah, who immediately began contacting family members. Within hours, Kate's hospital room was filled with the people who mattered most to her. Her parents drove up from Sacramento. Her brother Mark flew in from Denver. William's family came from Portland and Seattle. But Kate's condition continued to decline throughout the day. By afternoon, she could barely keep her eyes open, and speaking had become almost impossible. The doctor increased her morphine to keep her comfortable, but it made her very drowsy. "I don't think she's going to be able to hug everyone," William's sister Jennifer said quietly, tears streaming down her face. "She's so weak." William looked around the room at all the people who loved Kate. Her father sat in the corner, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Her mother held Kate's other hand, whispering prayers. Sarah was crying softly while Mark stood with his hand on her shoulder. "Maybe hugging isn't about the physical act," William said suddenly. "Maybe it's about being surrounded by love." He approached Kate's bedside and spoke softly near her ear. "Kate, everyone is here. Your whole family. Can you feel all the love in this room?" Kate's eyes fluttered open and she managed a small smile. She couldn't lift her arms to hug anyone, but she looked around the room, making eye contact with each person. Her gaze lingered longest on her parents and on William. "Love. You. All," she whispered, the words barely audible. One by one, each family member approached her bed. They spoke quietly to her, sharing memories and expressing their love. Some cried, others smiled through their tears, but everyone understood they were saying goodbye. When it was William's turn, he leaned close to Kate's ear. "You did it," he said. "You got through your whole list. You heard music and saw a sunrise and ate ice cream and had your hair brushed and danced to our song and hugged everyone you love." Kate squeezed his hand with surprising strength. "Thank you," she managed to say. That evening, as visiting hours ended, most of the family reluctantly left to get some rest. But Kate's parents and Sarah stayed, along with William. They arranged chairs around her bed, keeping vigil through what everyone sensed might be Kate's last night. The hospital was quieter at night, with only the essential sounds of medical equipment and the soft footsteps of nurses making their rounds. Kate drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes mumbling words that didn't quite make sense, other times lying perfectly still. Around midnight, Kate became more restless. She seemed to be trying to say something, but the words wouldn't come. William leaned closer, trying to understand what she needed. "Home," she finally managed to whisper. "Want to go home." William's heart broke. They couldn't take her home. She needed too much medical care. But he understood what she meant. She was tired of the hospital, tired of machines and medications and sterile rooms. She wanted to be somewhere that felt like love. "You are home," William said softly. "Wherever we're together, that's home. This room is home because we're here with you." Kate's breathing grew more irregular as the night wore on. Sometimes there would be long pauses between breaths that made everyone hold their own breath until she inhaled again. Dr. Martinez checked on her several times, adjusting her medication to keep her comfortable. "It could be tonight, or it could be a few more days," he told the family quietly. "Her body is working very hard. Let her know it's okay to let go when she's ready." As dawn approached, William realized he hadn't slept at all. Kate's mother had dozed fitfully in her chair, while her father maintained his quiet vigil by the window. Sarah had stepped out to call Kate's brother with an update. Kate opened her eyes as the first light of morning filtered through the windows. For a moment she seemed more alert than she had been all night. She looked directly at William with clear recognition. "The envelope," she whispered. William touched his jacket pocket where he kept her letter. "I read it," he said. "It was beautiful. Thank you." Kate smiled, a real smile that transformed her face despite the illness ravaging her body. "Good," she said more clearly than she had spoken in hours. "Remember, the promise." William knew she was referring to her request that he find happiness after she was gone. The promise that had seemed impossible just days ago now felt like a sacred responsibility. If Kate could face dying with such grace and concern for others, surely he could find the strength to honor her wishes. "I promise," he said, meaning it for the first time. "I'll remember how to be happy. Not right away, but eventually. I promise." Kate closed her eyes, satisfied. Her breathing became more peaceful, and some of the tension left her face. The morning sun streamed through the windows, reminding William of the sunrise they had shared just a few days ago. As the family began to stir and the hospital came to life around them, William realized that Kate had accomplished something remarkable. She had faced the end of her life with dignity and grace, making sure everyone she loved knew how much they meant to her. She had turned her dying into a gift for those she was leaving behind. The last item on her list had been to hug everyone she loved. Looking around the room at her family gathered close, William understood that she had done exactly that. Not with her arms, but with her presence, her words, and her example. Kate had spent her final days giving hugs made of courage and love and acceptance, and somehow William knew that those hugs would last long after she was gone. Saturday passed in a blur of quiet waiting. Kate slept most of the day, waking only occasionally and speaking very little. Her breathing had become shallow and irregular, but she seemed peaceful. The morphine kept her comfortable, and there were no signs that she was in pain. William remained by her bedside, holding her hand and talking to her softly, even when she appeared to be sleeping. The nurses had told him that hearing was often the last sense to fade, so he shared memories and told her how much he loved her. Sometimes he read aloud from the book of poetry they had enjoyed together, his voice filling the quiet room. Kate's family took turns sitting with her, each person finding their own way to say goodbye. Her mother sang the lullabies she had used when Kate was small. Her father read newspaper articles about the baseball team Kate had loved since childhood. Sarah shared stories about their adventures as sisters, making everyone smile despite their grief. As evening approached, Kate seemed to grow more restless. She moved her head from side to side and made soft sounds as if she was trying to communicate something important. William leaned close, trying to understand what she needed. "What is it, Kate?" he asked gently. "What do you need?" She opened her eyes and looked at him with surprising clarity. "The music," she whispered. "Play." The music William understood immediately. He reached for his phone and found their wedding song, the same one they had danced to just days ago. As it last began to play softly in the room, Kate's restlessness faded. She closed her eyes and smiled, her breathing becoming more even. The family gathered around her bed as the song played. No one spoke, but everyone understood they were witnessing something sacred. Kate's face looked peaceful and young, as if the music had transported her back to happier times. When the song ended, Kate opened her eyes one more time. She looked at each person around her bed, her gaze full of love and gratitude. When her eyes met William's, she mouthed the words, "Thank you," so clearly that everyone could understand. Then she closed her eyes and settled into what appeared to be the deepest, most peaceful sleep she had experienced in weeks. Her breathing was soft and regular, and the tension that had marked her face for so long finally disappeared completely. The night passed quietly. Kate's family maintained their vigil, taking turns napping in the uncomfortable hospital chairs. William dozed fitfully but woke every time Kate's breathing changed. Around 3 in the morning, he noticed that the pauses between her breaths were growing longer. Dr. Martinez arrived at sunrise, having been called by the night nurse. He examined Kate gently and spoke quietly with the family. Her body was beginning to shut down, he explained. It was likely a matter of hours now, not days. "Is she in any pain?" William asked, the question that had haunted him throughout Kate's illness. "No," Dr. Martinez assured him. "She's very peaceful. Her body is simply letting go." As morning turned to afternoon, Kate's breathing became even more irregular. Sometimes there would be several breaths close together, followed by long pauses that made everyone in the room hold their breath. But her face remained serene, and she showed no signs of distress. William found himself thinking about the promise he had made to her. Kate had asked him to find happiness again, to not spend his life grieving for her. It still seemed impossible, but watching her face dying with such grace, he began to understand what she meant. She wasn't asking him to forget her or to stop loving her. She was asking him to live fully, the way she had lived. Around 2 o'clock, Kate's breathing changed again. The pauses between breaths grew longer and her breathing became very shallow. William took her hand and began speaking to her softly. "It's okay, Kate," he said. "You can let go. You fought so hard and you've been so brave. We'll all be okay. I promise I'll keep my promise to you." Kate's mother joined him, stroking her daughter's hair. "We love you so much, sweetheart," she said through her tears. "You've been the most wonderful daughter and wife and sister. We're going to miss you forever. But we understand. You're tired. It's okay to rest now." The room filled with quiet expressions of love as each family member said their final words to Kate. Sarah held her sister's other hand, telling her about all the ways she had been a perfect big sister. Kate's father stood at the foot of the bed, his usually stoic face wet with tears as he thanked his daughter for bringing so much joy to their family. At exactly 3:17 in the afternoon, Kate took a gentle breath and then simply stopped breathing. There was no struggle, no distress, just a peaceful transition from life to whatever comes after. The room fell silent except for the quiet sounds of the family crying. William continued holding Kate's hand for several minutes, not quite ready to let go. Her face looked incredibly peaceful, younger somehow, as if death had erased the months of illness and pain. She looked like the woman he had fallen in love with 15 years ago. Dr. Martinez entered the room quietly and officially confirmed what everyone already knew. He spoke gently about the procedures that would follow, but his words seemed to come from very far away. William was focused entirely on Kate's face, memorizing every detail. The nurses were respectful and kind as they helped the family through the next steps. They offered to leave Kate's body in the room for a while so the family could have more time to say goodbye. William was grateful for this gift, the chance to sit with Kate in peace, without machines or medical urgency. As the afternoon wore on, family members began to leave to make necessary phone calls and arrangements. Eventually, only William remained in the room with Kate. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant sounds of the hospital continuing its work. William pulled out Kate's letter and read it again. Her words about finding happiness seemed less impossible now. She had shown him how to face the hardest things with grace and love. If she could die so peacefully, perhaps he could learn to live without her. "I love you," he said aloud to the quiet room. "I'll always love you, and I'll keep my promise. I don't know how yet, but I will." As the sun began to set outside the hospital windows, William finally stood to leave. He kissed Kate's forehead one last time, whispered another goodbye, and walked out of room 237 for the final time. The automatic doors of the hospital slid open as he stepped into the evening air. The world outside looked exactly the same as it had that morning, but everything had changed. William stood in the parking lot for a moment, breathing deeply and feeling the weight of his new reality. Kate was gone, but her love remained. Her courage remained. Her wisdom about living fully and finding joy remained. William didn't know how he would carry on without her, but he knew he would. He had promised her, and Kate's promises were sacred things. As he drove home to their empty house, William realized that Kate's final gift to him had been showing him how to say goodbye with love instead of regret. She had taught him that even endings could be beautiful when they were filled with gratitude and grace. The hug she had wanted to give everyone hadn't been a physical embrace after all. It had been this, the gift of a peaceful death, the blessing of love expressed clearly, the example of facing the hardest moments with dignity. Kate had hugged them all with her courage, and that embrace would last forever. The house felt impossibly empty when William walked through the front door. Everything was exactly as he had left it that morning. Kate's coffee mug still in the sink from the last time she had been home, her reading glasses on the kitchen counter, her favorite sweater draped over the back of the living room chair, but the silence was overwhelming. William stood in the entryway for several minutes, unsure what to do next. For months, his entire world had revolved around hospital schedules and medical appointments. Now suddenly there was nothing urgent demanding his attention. The absence of crisis felt almost as disorienting as Kate's death itself. He made his way to their bedroom and sat on Kate's side of the bed. Her pillow still smelled faintly of her shampoo. William lay down and buried his face in the fabric, allowing himself to cry for the first time since Kate had died. The tears came in waves, grief mixed with exhaustion and relief that her suffering was finally over. The phone rang constantly throughout the evening. Word of Kate's death had spread quickly through their circle of friends and extended family. William let most calls go to voicemail, not ready to have the same conversation over and over. Sarah had offered to handle the notifications, but he wasn't ready to delegate that responsibility yet. When he finally listened to the voicemails, William was touched by the outpouring of love and support. Former colleagues, college friends, neighbors, and acquaintances all shared memories of Kate and offered their condolences. Each message painted a picture of the impact Kate had made on people's lives, often in ways William hadn't known about. Mrs. Chen from next door had left a particularly moving message. She talked about how Kate had helped her with English lessons when she first moved to America, spending hours each week patiently teaching and encouraging her. Kate had never mentioned this to William, but Mrs. Chen's grateful words revealed another layer of his wife's generous spirit. That night, William couldn't bear to sleep in their bed. Instead, he dozed on the living room couch, wrapped in the throw blanket Kate had loved. Every corner of the house held memories, but somehow the couch felt less overwhelming than their shared bedroom. He woke at dawn to find Sarah letting herself in with the spare key. She carried a bag of groceries and a thermos of coffee, her eyes red from crying, but her manner determinedly practical. "You need to eat," she said simply, heading straight to the kitchen, "and we need to talk about the arrangements." Over breakfast that William barely touched, they discussed the details Kate had requested for her memorial service. She had been very specific about her wishes, a celebration of life rather than a traditional funeral, her favorite music, and stories shared by friends and family instead of formal eulogies. She planned everything, Sarah said, pulling out a folder Kate had given her months ago, right down to the flowers she wanted and the poems she wanted read. She said she didn't want you to have to make these decisions while you were grieving. William read through Kate's detailed instructions, marveling at her thoughtfulness even in planning her own memorial. She had chosen readings that spoke about love continuing beyond death, songs that had meant something special to them, and she had even written suggestions for the reception afterward. She wanted everyone to tell funny stories about her, Sarah said, smiling through her tears. She said she didn't want people to be sad. She wanted them to remember the good times. The next few days passed in a blur of arrangements and visitors. Kate's parents arrived from Sacramento to help with preparations. William's family came back from their various cities, the house filled with casseroles and flowers, and the constant presence of people who cared. William found himself going through the motions mechanically. He approved catering choices and selected photographs for a memorial display, but everything felt surreal. People kept asking how he was doing, and he didn't know how to answer. He wasn't sure he was feeling anything at all. 3 days after Kate's death, William found himself alone in the house for the first time. Everyone had gone to run errands or handle various tasks, and the sudden silence was both a relief and a challenge. He wandered from room to room, touching Kate's belongings and trying to make sense of his new reality. In Kate's study, he found her journal lying open on the desk. The last entry was dated a week before she died, and William hesitated before reading it. But something drew him to her words, a need to hear her voice one more time. "I'm not afraid of dying anymore," Kate had written. "I was terrified at first, but now I feel peaceful about it. I think it's because I know William will be okay. He's stronger than he realizes, and he has so much love to give. I worry that he'll think his life is over when mine ends, but I hope he'll remember that love doesn't die. It just changes form." The entry continued with Kate's thoughts about their life together, her gratitude for their love, and her hopes for William's future. She wrote about wanting him to travel, to pursue the photography hobby he had abandoned during her illness, to maybe even find love again someday. "I used to think that would make me jealous," she had written, "the idea of William loving someone else. But now I understand that love isn't finite. The love he gave me will always be ours. Any love he finds in the future will be something new and different. I want him to have that. I want him to have everything." William closed the journal carefully, feeling as if Kate had spoken directly to him from beyond death. Her words were like another hug, another gift to help him navigate the impossible landscape of life without her. That evening, he called his boss and arranged to take an extended leave of absence from work. He couldn't imagine sitting in meetings or focusing on projects when his entire world had shifted. His colleagues were understanding and supportive, telling him to take all the time he needed. The memorial service was held on a Thursday at the community center where Kate had volunteered. William had worried that people wouldn't come on a weekday, but the parking lot was full and the room was packed. Colleagues from Kate's job at the library, fellow volunteers from the literacy program, neighbors, college friends, and family members filled every seat. True to Kate's wishes, the service was a celebration. People shared funny stories about Kate's terrible cooking attempts, her competitive streak during board game nights, and her habit of adopting stray animals. William found himself laughing for the first time since Kate's death, as he listened to stories that revealed new facets of the woman he had loved. When it was his turn to speak, William had planned to read one of Kate's chosen poems. Instead, he found himself talking about her list, the 6 simple things she had wanted to experience one more time. He told the gathered crowd about the sunrise they had watched together, the music and dancing, and the way Kate had managed to hug everyone she loved even when she could barely lift her arms. "Kate taught me that love isn't something that ends," William said, his voice stronger than he had expected. "It's something that continues in different forms. Every time we remember her laugh or carry forward her kindness, she's still loving us. Every time we live fully because she showed us how precious life is, she's still with us." After the service, people lingered for hours at the reception, sharing more stories and memories. William was amazed by how many lives Kate had touched, often in small ways she had never mentioned to him. The picture that emerged was of a woman who had lived with intention and generosity, making the world better simply by being herself. As the crowd began to thin, William stepped outside for some fresh air. The autumn evening was crisp and clear, and he found himself looking up at the stars. Kate had loved astronomy and had often pointed out constellations during their evening walks. Standing there in the darkness, William felt something shift inside him. The crushing weight of grief was still there, but alongside it was something else. A sense of purpose, perhaps, or maybe just the faintest glimmer of hope. Kate's love hadn't died with her. It lived on in the memories of everyone who had known her, in the lessons she had taught, and in the promise she had extracted from William to keep living fully. He wasn't ready to be happy yet. He wasn't sure he ever would be, but for the first time since Kate's death, William could imagine a future where he honored her memory by embracing life instead of just enduring it. The hug she had given him through her courage and love would have to sustain him as he learned to carry on without her physical presence. As he drove home through the quiet streets, William realized that Kate's final gift to him was still unfolding. She had shown him not just how to say goodbye, but how to begin the long process of learning to live with love that had changed form, but would never truly end. 6 months after Kate's death, William stood in the same hospital garden where they had shared one of their last perfect days together. The season had come full circle. It was spring now, and the garden was alive with new blooms and fresh green leaves. The fountain gurgled the same gentle song, but everything else had changed. He wasn't alone this time. Sarah walked beside him, carrying a small ceramic pot that held some of Kate's ashes. They had decided together that this garden, where Kate had felt such peace and joy, was the perfect place for a small memorial. She loved it here, Sarah said as they approached the bench under the old oak tree. I think she would be happy to become part of this place. William nodded, touching the letter in his jacket pocket. He still carried Kate's words with him everywhere, reading them whenever the grief threatened to overwhelm him. The promise he had made to her, to find happiness again, remained the most difficult challenge of his life. But he was slowly learning what it meant. The first months after Kate's death had been the hardest thing William had ever experienced. There were days when getting out of bed felt impossible, when the simplest tasks seemed insurmountable. Well-meaning friends encouraged him to move on or get back to normal, but William had learned there was no going back to who he had been before losing Kate. Instead, he had to discover who he could become. With the help of a grief counselor and the patient support of family and friends, William had begun to understand that healing didn't mean forgetting Kate or stopping his love for her. It meant learning to carry that love forward into a life she would no longer share. He had returned to work after 3 months, but in a reduced capacity. His boss had been understanding about his need for flexibility as he navigated his new reality. Some days were better than others. William had learned to be patient with himself on the difficult days and grateful for the moments when life felt manageable again. The house had been the biggest challenge. Every room held memories that could either comfort or devastate him, depending on his emotional state. Sarah had helped him pack away some of Kate's belongings, but he kept the things that brought him peace: her favorite books, the sweater that still smelled like her perfume, the coffee mug she had used every morning. He had also kept Kate's camera, a hobby she had pursued with passion but never quite mastered. Looking through her photographs after her death, William had been struck by how she saw beauty in ordinary moments. Sunrise through their kitchen window, their neighbor's cat sleeping in a patch of sunlight, his hands as he played guitar. Her pictures captured a world full of small wonders. Inspired by Kate's vision, William had begun taking photographs himself. It started as a way to feel connected to her, but gradually became something more. Through the camera lens, he began to see the world the way Kate had seen it, full of moments worth preserving, beauty worth noticing, life worth celebrating even in the midst of loss. I brought something to read, Sarah said, pulling William back to the present moment. She held a folded piece of paper that he recognized as Kate's handwriting. I found this in her desk when I was cleaning out her study. I think she meant for us to find it. The paper contained a short poem Kate had written during her illness. As Sarah read the words aloud, William felt Kate's presence so strongly it was almost like she was sitting on the bench beside them. When I am gone, don't mourn in sadness, but celebrate the love we shared. Plant flowers where my ashes rest and know that I am everywhere, in morning light and evening stars, in laughter carried on the wind, in every act of kindness done, in every heart where love begins. They scattered Kate's ashes around the base of the oak tree in silence, each lost in their own memories and thoughts. A gentle breeze stirred the branches above them, and William chose to see it as Kate's approval of their choice. As they prepared to leave the garden, William felt a sense of completion he hadn't expected. The physical ritual of returning Kate to a place she had loved felt like another step in learning to let go while still holding on to what mattered most. She would be proud of you, Sarah said as they walked back toward the hospital parking lot. "The way you've been handling everything. The way you're keeping your promise to her." William wasn't sure he agreed with that assessment. He still had days when grief felt like a weight he couldn't carry, when the future seemed impossibly empty without Kate. But he also had days now when he could remember her with more joy than sorrow, when he could imagine possibilities he wasn't ready to pursue yet, but no longer seemed impossible. That evening, William did something he hadn't done since before Kate's diagnosis. He called his old friend Marcus, whom he had played music with in college. They hadn't spoken in months, but Marcus had left several messages offering support that William hadn't been ready to accept until now. "I was thinking about getting together to play some music," William said when Marcus answered the phone. "Nothing serious, just, I miss it. Kate always loved hearing me play, and I think she would want me to start again." Marcus was immediately enthusiastic, suggesting they meet the following weekend at his home studio. As they talked, William felt a spark of anticipation he hadn't experienced in a long time. Music had been such an important part of his life before Kate's illness consumed everything. Maybe it was time to rediscover that part of himself. The weekend jam session with Marcus turned into a regular monthly gathering. Other musicians joined them, and slowly, William found himself part of a community again. They played covers of songs they loved and experimented with new compositions. William even wrote a song about Kate, but instead of being sad, it was a celebration of their love and the gift of having known her. As spring turned to summer, William made another significant decision. He signed up for a photography class at the community college. Kate's camera work had inspired him, but he wanted to develop his own style and skills. The class met on Thursday evenings, forcing him to leave the house and interact with new people. His first attempts were clumsy, but his instructor encouraged him to keep practicing. William found himself drawn to photographing everyday moments that reminded him of Kate's vision. Children playing in parks, elderly couples walking hand in hand, flowers growing through cracks in sidewalks. Through his lens, he began to document a world where beauty and sorrow coexisted, where loss and hope walked side by side. 1 year after Kate's death, William organized a memorial concert in her honor. He had talked to her former colleagues at the library about raising money for the literacy program where she had volunteered. The event featured local musicians playing Kate's favorite songs, and the community center was packed with people who had known and loved her. William performed publicly for the first time in years, playing Kate's song for an audience that included many people who had never heard it before. As his fingers moved across the familiar chords, he felt Kate's presence not as a painful absence but as a continuing source of love and inspiration. The concert raised enough money to fund literacy classes for an entire year. As William watched children and adults learning to read with the help of volunteers, he understood that this was what Kate had meant about love taking different forms. Her compassion was still changing lives, still making the world better, even though she was no longer physically present to see it. Standing in the hospital garden that spring day with Sarah, William had been taking his first tentative steps toward the future Kate had envisioned for him. Now, looking back, he could see how each small decision to engage with life again had led to unexpected moments of connection and purpose. He still missed Kate every day. He suspected he always would. But the crushing weight of early grief had transformed into something more manageable, a constant awareness of love that had been real and precious and life-changing. Kate's hug, given through her courage and wisdom and final gift of peaceful death, had taught him that love doesn't end with death. It simply learns to express itself in new ways. William kept his promise to Kate, not by forgetting his grief or pretending to be unaffected by her loss, but by choosing each day to live fully in honor of the love they had shared. In music and photography, in volunteer work and friendships, in moments of ordinary beauty noticed and appreciated, Kate's influence continued to shape his life. The hug that had seemed impossible to live without had become the foundation for learning to live again, differently than before, but with purpose and hope and the knowledge that true love never really says goodbye. It just whispers, "Until we meet again," and trusts that those left behind will carry its light forward into whatever comes next.